in to CBS News 24/7. I'm Elizabeth Cook. Any minute now, President Trump is expected to sign new executive orders. We're keeping an eye on the White House right now, one day after Trump said he's looking at ways to serving a third term. And we're also keeping an eye on the stocks. They're going up and down on Wall Street today. Traders very nervous for future tariffs ahead of promised tariffs from the White House. And a difficult firefight going on in Louisiana, why a lightning strike could have caused an inferno that shut down an entire highway. But you're looking at the White House, where any moment now the president will sign another set of executive orders. That comes ahead of a new set of reciprocal tariffs this week. Those are set to go into effect on Wednesday. Now, President Trump took to Truth Social just moments ago with this, quote, "Companies are pouring into our country at levels never seen before, with jobs and money to follow. It is a beautiful thing to watch." For more on Mr. Trump's big week of tariffs, let's get right to CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman. Always a good day when I get to talk to Willie. Great to see you, sir. 55% of people feel the administration is focusing too much on tariffs. Any sign the administration's going to let up?
Hey there, Liz. Always a good day to talk to you as well, and happy Monday to you. Well, the administration is planning to move forward with these tariffs. The president over the weekend was asked whether or not it'll be 10 or 15 countries or so. In that question specifically, the president was asked about potentially putting on tariffs on the countries that have the largest trade deficit, with the United States. The president alluded to putting tariffs, reciprocal tariffs, on all countries. So, and as you see, there's some polling from our new CBS News polling essentially saying that the president isn't focusing on lowering those prices enough. And a lot of Americans are bracing for how this could potentially raise prices. Tariffs on countries, on many different types of goods could potentially raise prices. That is certainly something that could happen. The president saying on those auto tariffs that he doesn't care necessarily about how auto companies raise those tariffs, talking about foreign cars specifically. But this White House leaving some wiggle room, perhaps the president saying that essentially these tariffs won't be as bad as the tariffs that are coming from the countries. No details yet in terms of the countries and the percentages of those tariffs, but we know that they are coming. The president saying that this Wednesday, April 2nd, will be Liberation Day in terms of setting those tariffs across the board on those countries, Liz.
And Willie, also over the weekend, the president said to a reporter that he wasn't kidding when he said he was looking to run for a third term. Could that even be a reality, though? Because it's written in the Constitution. There are term limits. I mean, there's a 22nd Amendment.
That's right, and I want to bring up the text for our viewers to understand this, what the 22nd Amendment says about presidential term limits. It's very specific. It says no person shall be elected to the office of the president more than twice. And so the president being elected twice cannot run for president again. That's what the Constitution says. Now, if he wants to be able to run for a second term, there would need to be a constitutional amendment. You'd have to get Congress's buy-in, an overwhelming majority there. You'd have to get buy-in from the states as well. That is a tall order to follow. But this is still something that the president says that he is using his words essentially through this interview with NBC News that he's serious about, and something that his allies continue to talk about over the weekend and since he said these comments. But it's unclear the path forward of how that would potentially happen. But I just want to note for our viewers at home the importance of understanding the Constitution here, which bars the president from running for a third term, Liz.
And Willie, while we're talking about the president, we're hearing reports that he has his first foreign trip scheduled. What do we know about that?
Yeah, those reports surfaced over the weekend that the president could be potentially traveling to Saudi Arabia. Now, the White House isn't necessarily pushing back a full force against that, but I do have a quote from a White House official saying an opportunity for international travel for the president is something that is being looked at. And then they go on to say that we don't yet have a specific plan and will provide information when it is official. Now, this president has said that he would be open to travel. Most notably, he essentially said he'd be open to travel to meet President Vladimir Putin. We know, of course, that the U.S. has had those negotiations between Ukraine, conversations between the U.S. and Ukraine and the U.S. and Russia in Saudi Arabia. That country has hosted those conversations. That could potentially be some place that the president visits if there's some type of deal to be announced, but the White House at least saying for now, nothing to announce, Liz.
All right, we'll be watching. Willie James Inman live for us at the White House. Thanks so much, Willie. All right, a live look at the Dow and an early reaction ahead of those incoming reciprocal tariffs. Voters also sounding off early in our latest CBS News polls. Only 48% approve of the president's handling of the economy. 52% disapprove. And that disapproval number up from 49% on March 2nd. And then there's this. 48% say the president's policies are making the job market lose jobs. Let's bring in Colby Smith, a New York Times reporter who covers the Federal Reserve and the U.S. economy. Thank you so much for being with us, Colby. Do Americans have good reason here to be concerned about their wallets and potentially their jobs because of these tariffs?
So there's a lot of uncertainty here, and I think that's what we're seeing in a lot of these surveys that are tracking consumer sentiment. People don't know how to feel about the economy, and they don't feel certain that their economic security is strong here because every day there seems to be new policy announcements and new changes afoot when it comes to things like tariffs, immigration restrictions, things like that. And so it's not surprising that amidst this uncertainty, people have started to question whether or not our business is going to continue to hire. Are they going to continue to expand? And these are the questions that not only companies are grappling with, but also policymakers at the Federal Reserve.
And Colby, Trump aide Peter Navarro says the president's new tariffs will raise $6 trillion in federal revenue over the next decade. I want to get your reaction to that.
So it's a bit confusing because it definitely draws some questions about what exactly the intentions of these tariffs are. To have revenue figures of that amount would suggest that consumers weren't really changing their behavior. Businesses weren't bringing their operations back on shore to the U.S., which would avoid those tariff charges. So it's kind of unclear exactly what the Trump administration is trying to get at here. If they want to see revenue of that level, which they say will help to fund the tax cuts that were key to Trump's campaign for the presidency, that suggests that companies aren't making the amendments that they had wanted them to see and shoring up U.S. manufacturing operations in the way in which that the president campaigned on. So it's hard to actually get a sense of where they're coming from with these figures. In fact, you would think that they would want to see them on the lower end. That would mean that more companies were coming on shore. But again, this just shows that there's a lot of moving parts here, and it's not yet clear what the extent of these tariffs are going to be and how businesses are indeed going to respond.
All right, New York Times reporter Colby Smith. Thank you so much, Colby. Now, one of the industries feeling the effects of all these tariffs is, of course, the auto industry. So we wanted to know what local dealerships thought about these reciprocal tariffs. Let's bring in CBS News reporter Karen Hua, who is live in Houston for us for more on the tariff reaction. Karen, what are you hearing from local shops about these incoming tariffs?
Hey, Liz. Yeah, so I spent the morning talking to several new and used car dealerships in this Houston area, and many of the owners say they're quite concerned. Just to give you a little bit of a timeline, President Trump has said these tariffs on passenger vehicles and light trucks will go into effect this Thursday, April 3rd, and then his 25% tariff on auto parts from other countries, that'll go into effect no later than May 3rd. We're here at Liberty Auto. It's in North Houston. The owner's name also happens to be Houston. Take a listen at what he had to say about these tariffs.
Well, I'm concerned. Obviously, it'll affect new car dealers the most and most dramatically and soonest because of the cost of goods going up. But I'm afraid that it will apply inflationary pressure across the economy and make it more difficult for people to afford cars.
So owner Houston Baker says that even though they sell used cars here, he's worried these tariffs will have this trickle-down effect from new cars to used cars. He explains to us that inflation is typically bad for the auto industry as a whole, for them as a business and also for the consumer. He explains that when car prices go up, naturally fewer buyers come in if they can't afford the cars, and therefore they as a business make fewer sales. So he's worried that with these tariffs, if their car prices continue to go up, they're going to continue to feel this pinch. President Trump has said he, quote, couldn't care less if car prices do go up. Of course, President Trump has been trying to move manufacturing and production back to the U.S. So President Trump is really hoping that this tariff will encourage consumers to buy more American brand cars and also for automakers to bring their manufacturing to the U.S. However, Houston Baker here says that even though some auto companies like Ford or Chevy may be based in the U.S. and manufacturing in the U.S., they still likely buy auto parts from other countries. So there are very few, if not no, companies that may be immune to these tariffs. For now, the company here says they're hoping just to brace for impact and hope for the best. Back to you, Liz.
Yeah, before you go, Karen, I'm just curious, are they seeing more customers come in this week? I mean, I know it's only Monday, but I'm curious if more people are coming in now to try to get their car before the tariffs kick in, or maybe stockpile some of those car parts.
You know, Liberty Auto unfortunately says their sales have been down for quite a while now because of inflation, even before these tariffs. So Monday, they say, is usually a pretty busy day for auto dealerships. I've been here for a few hours this morning, have not seen many customers come in and out.
All right, Karen Waugh, thank you so much. Live for us in Houston. Now, a dorm ceiling comes crashing down in Miami. This was amazing. We're tracking the impact of the severe weather moving across the U.S. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Heading overseas to Lithuania now, where the bodies of 3 American soldiers have been recovered from a swamp 1 week after they went missing. They found the soldiers after their military vehicle was pulled from the swamp, and a recovery operation is still underway to find the 4th soldier. They were reported missing after they didn't return from a training mission near the border with Belarus. Lithuania hosts more than 1,000 American troops. And our monitor is taking us now to New Mexico, where within the hour, a judge will hear arguments on whether to release body cam footage and other evidence in the deaths of Gene Hackman and his wife. The couple's estate is asking the judge to seal the evidence to protect the family's right to privacy. The actor and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, were found dead in their Santa Fe home last month. Autopsy showed Hackman died of heart disease. He also had advanced Alzheimer's. Arakawa died from a rare respiratory illness caused by rodents. And the FBI has launched an investigation after the headquarters of the New Mexico Republican Party were torched and graffitied. The party says the building in Albuquerque was targeted in a, quote, deliberate act of arson. Yesterday, the words ICE equals KKK were also spray painted on the side of the building. No one was hurt in that fire. Now to Louisiana, where crews are responding to a tanker fire. This is in Point Cuppy Parish near Baton Rouge. CBS News correspondent Chanel Call joins us now. Chanel, what do we know about this fire?
Well, some dramatic images coming into our newsroom this hour out of Point Cuppy Parish, Louisiana. That's about 30 miles west of Baton Rouge. So crews on the ground say the fire may have been sparked by a lightning strike during some really severe weather this morning. It temporarily shut down traffic on Highway 70. As for how this happened, authorities are saying that lightning essentially struck a wastewater holding tank with some minor oil residue, and that was allowed to burn itself out. Here's more from the Chief of Operations Officer of Point Cuppy District 4.
We've got foam that we're putting on top of it, but somehow it's breaking through our foam blanket and it's still igniting. We get some luck, put it out, and it ignites right back up. It could take another hour, could take 30 minutes, could take 2 hours. Right now we got Cross Springs Refinery is bringing some foam, a lot of foam, and that'll be able to help suppress it.
Again, really dramatic images coming to us this hour from near Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The sheriff's office says thankfully no one was injured during this blast, and there was no off-site impact or contamination from that oil.
All right, CBS News correspondent Chanel Call. Thank you so much, Chanel. Well, severe storms are moving into the East Coast right now after ripping through central and southern states over the weekend. Now check out the damage left behind in parts of Indiana. Stormy weather, downed trees and power lines smashing into cars and then just sending debris flying through neighborhoods. And this video is out of Florida, where heavy rain caused a partial ceiling collapse at the dorms of the University of Miami. Luckily, no one was injured in all that. A doorbell camera capturing a strong storm lifting the roof off a mobile home in Jackson, Michigan, just south of Lansing. The National Weather Service says it's received nearly 400 reports of storm damage from that middle of the state. So let's go now to CBS News correspondent Skylar Henry, who is live for us in Atlanta dealing with severe weather of its own. And there's some warnings right now. Skylar, what can you tell us where you're at?
Hey, Liz, always good to see you. Well, just in the last several minutes, we've learned from the FAA that there is a ground stop at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. That is the busiest airport in the world as this storm passes through. And we have also seen several tornado warnings and watches in some of the counties in the metro area as well, some extending until 1:45 Eastern time. That ground stop, according to officials, they have indicated that they anticipate that to be wrapped up within the next 15 to 20 minutes. So not a big problem as it relates to delays, at least as of now, right on cue. Of course, a car splashing by. But officials with the National Weather Service say that they are concerned about several issues. I mentioned the possible threat of tornadoes in some of the metro areas. They also say that they are concerned about wind damage and the possibility of severe gusts, somewhere around 60 to 70 miles per hour, depending on where you are in this storm's area and path here. They say that they are concerned about potential damage that can come from that. That's down trees, down power lines, and what could happen to people's property, businesses, stores, and the like. They have also indicated that this will be a storm that moves relatively quickly through the Atlanta area onto the Carolinas. They say that the window of concern here in Atlanta specifically is between 12 o'clock, which is about an hour ago, to 5 o'clock Eastern time, as you heard a little bit of the thunder there. They say that from there they will continue to monitor to see and assess what types of damage is happening all across this metro area. But again, as of now, flights grounded at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport because of this weather. Looking ahead to the Carolinas, there are concerns out there for people that have been dealing with those wildfires, Liz. Remember that? Yes. That have been concerned about the dry conditions in that area. So this rain will be a bit of good news. Still, however, obviously rain and super dry conditions certainly can make for some treacherous conditions, and so officials have obviously been keeping their eyes on what's happening out there as well. We will continue to monitor the severity of the storm here in the metro Atlanta area to see what potential reports of damage or power outages that may come in this area. But as of now, things appear to be relatively calm. We'll hope that it stays that way for the rest of the afternoon.
All right, Skylar Henry braving the elements for us there in Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you so much, Skylar. And it was interesting, Jess, he was on 24/7 a couple hours ago, and it was sunny and bright, and then you saw there it was raining. So as you mentioned, the storm was moving really quickly.
It's moving fast, and it's like a band of showers and thunderstorms that are just sweeping across the south and tracking into the east as we head into the evening hours tonight. He mentioned a couple of really good points, though. We're really concerned about possible tornadoes in these areas, and on top of that, damaging winds, thunderstorm activity widespread, which means we could see hail in the middle portion of the day today, anywhere from Atlanta all the way over into the Carolinas tonight. So I'm going to dive into that storm right now, pulling up the map just below me and kind of giving you a good picture. Widespread throughout the south, we're concerned about tornado warnings. They're starting to pop up in areas like southern Alabama near Dothan, all the way just south of Atlanta too. Now that storm tracks offshore into the overnight hours tonight by Tuesday, but now what we're concerned about is the next system that's moving in just from the Midwest as we head all the way into our Wednesday forecast. That's going to bring in a lot of similar characteristics to what this storm is doing right now for our friends all the way over into Atlanta, where Skylar is currently at. Here's our satellite and radar. Just within the past couple of hours, we mentioned that he was dealing with dry conditions, light showers, and now airports like Atlanta are dealing with a lot of diverting when it comes to those aircraft due to how strong these storms are. The wind gusts are severe. To add to that, we're also keeping a close eye on these little red specks that you see just near Dothan. That's actually near Fort Rucker, Alabama, all the way over into southern parts closer to Atlanta, where tornado warnings are in effect right now. we take a look at that severe storm threat and watch it move closer to the Carolinas into the evening hours tonight. This is around 7 o'clock as many people are trying to get home from work and school. It pushes offshore into the overnight hours tonight, closer to D.C., all the way up into New York. And on the back end, remember I mentioned that second storm that's coming as we head into Wednesday? The origin of it is closer to Kansas, all throughout the Midwest. That's going to push its way off into the east, heading into our Wednesday afternoon, meaning that enhanced risk really stretches widespread throughout these communities. We could possibly see tornadoes. We could see heavy amounts of hail. And to add to that, of course, the damaging winds are a big concern for us right now, too. Liz, I'm going to send it back over to you.
Jess, thank you so much. The woman known as the Doomsday Mom is back on trial again today, this time in Arizona. Lori Vallow Daybell is already serving a life sentence for murdering her 2 kids, 16-year-old Tylee Ryan and 7-year-old Joshua Vallow. Now she's charged with conspiracy to commit murder and the death of her 4th husband, Charles Vallow. And jury selection began today. CBS News correspondent Andres Gutierrez has that story.
Because Lori Vallow Daybell is representing herself in court, she will get to question the more than 200 potential jurors. 12 of them will decide her fate here in Arizona. This time, prosecutors allege that she conspired with her brother to kill her ex-husband, Charles Vallow, back in 2019. Her brother initially claimed he shot Charles in self-defense, but he died a few months later of natural causes. Vallow Daybell made headlines that same year when her children went missing. Their remains were later discovered on the Idaho property of her 5th husband, Chad Daybell. Both were convicted of multiple charges. She received a life sentence without parole in Idaho, and he received the death penalty. She was extradited to Arizona, where if she is convicted here, she faces at least 25 additional years on top of those current life sentences. She's also awaiting yet another trial for conspiring to kill her niece's ex-husband. She has pleaded not guilty. For this trial, the goal is to have a jury seated by the end of the week, so opening statements can begin on Monday, the 7th. I'm Andres Gutierrez in Phoenix, Arizona. Now back to you.
Thank you, Andres. Well, political chaos is intensifying in France as the country's far-right leader is barred from running in the next presidential election. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Elon Musk brought his checkbook to Wisconsin over the weekend in the middle of a closely watched Supreme Court race. Musk handed out checks for $1 million each to 2 voters, urging them to vote for the conservative Brad Schimmel. Now, Musk has donated more than $3 million to the state's Republican Party, and his PAC has spent more than $12 million in advertising and campaign operations for this candidate.
Normally, an election for a judge would not be that big of a deal. It just so happens that in this case, it could decide the control of the U.S. House of Representatives, which is a huge deal.
I never could have dreamed that I'd be fighting the richest man in the world.
Now, Musk is getting behind that conservative candidate over concerns the state will withdraw voting districts, giving Democrats a chance at 2 additional House seats. Voters will head to the polls tomorrow. And frustration over the Trump administration's immigration policies brought thousands of protesters to the streets of Dallas this past weekend. They called for reform as a crackdown on undocumented migrants, foreign students, and even legal U.S. residents continues. Let's bring in CBS News reporter, Justice reporter, I should say, Jake Rosen. Jake, great to be with you. Now, along with those protests, the fight continues in the courts over the president's policies. So where do those cases stand today?
That's right. That big lawsuit from the ACLU and other legal groups suing the Trump administration to try to block the deportation of those alleged Tren de Aragua members. There were some explosive hearings last week. There will be another on Thursday this week. Judge Boasberg issued an order today setting up a clash where the government will again have to argue in front of him why they did not turn those 2 planes at the center of all of this containing alleged Tren de Aragua gang members around. We know that the government and the plaintiffs have both had to file briefings over this, and the government basically argued that President Trump had authority all along to order these military jets wherever he wanted them to go. In addition to that, they also believe that Boasberg's order, because it was just verbal and not put in writing, was not binding to them. And we will see where Judge Boasberg goes with that. It's very possible that he attempts to hold the Department of Justice, or at least someone in the government, in contempt of court. And again, in a lot of these cases that have really brought a bigger spark of outrage is, we've seen these cases where people have been detained on student visas. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that over 300 student visas have been canceled, a lot of which have been done so because of the administration's view on how these people have spoken out in protests and in writings about the ongoing conflict in Israel and Gaza. You can see the video playing on the screen right now. That's just one of the cases of a student at Tufts University who was detained. These cases are all still pending. A lot of the attorneys for these people have blocked their deportations outside of the U.S. However, because the government does have some leeway here, they have been able to detain these people like Mahmoud Khalil and a couple others across the government in ICE detention centers in Texas and Louisiana.
And finally, Jake, we learned that 2 more federal prosecutors in Tennessee and Los Angeles were reportedly fired by the White House. Now, the White House didn't fully confirm that to us, but we did get this statement from Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. She said, quote, "The White House, in coordination with the Department of Justice, has dismissed more than 50 U.S. attorneys and deputies in the past few weeks. The American people deserve a judicial branch full of honest arbiters of the law who want to protect democracy, not subvert it." Now, I want to get your thoughts on this, Jake, because is this yet another shattering of norms from the White House? That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, and there are always turnovers, especially at the upper levels of these different offices around the country when there are administration changes. It was no surprise when the big U.S. attorneys in all these places, who are in very often cases are politically aligned with the administration that they're serving under. However, in firing line prosecutors, which are basically the people who do the day-to-day arguing in front of judges and in courtrooms across the country, that is the norm-breaking step here to basically go down the line of not just the bosses, but to go through the records of people who have actually argued at the lower level. These are people who, at least in our job here in Washington, D.C., are arguing case after case after case in front of these judges all day long. At least in one instance of this, in the firing of an attorney, government attorney in Los Angeles, the attorney at hand had actually run for Congress as a Democrat in 2020 in New York and had been very outspoken about his opposition to President Trump. He had not been fired yet. At least in that case, it proves what the Department of Justice is alleging all along, that there are people who are aligned with the Biden administration, or at least against President Trump, who are still in the Department of Justice, potentially subverting Donald Trump's agenda. However, in a lot of these cases, these firings are last minute, on short order, and are basically just because the department felt like they needed to do so.
CBS News Justice reporter Jake Rosen, thank you so much, Jake. A criminal court found French far-right politician Marine Le Pen guilty of misusing European Union funds. Judges immediately barred her from running for public office over the next 5 years. Our foreign correspondent Elaine Cobb is in Paris reporting on what comes next.
Far-right leader Marine Le Pen says she will appeal her conviction for embezzling public funds. The court today handed her a 4-year prison sentence and barred her from seeking public office for the next 5 years, dashing her dream of being France's next president. The appeal will not change that ban, which goes into effect immediately. Le Pen's lawyer called the court decision scandalous and a blow to democracy. Her National Rally Party spokesman said the 56-year-old politician is in fighting mood as far-right leaders from Hungary, Italy and the Netherlands sent messages of support. She and 8 other party members were found guilty of using EU funds to pay party staffers in Paris. Her 4-year sentence includes 2 suspended and 2 years wearing an electronic bracelet. She was also fined more than $100,000. Le Pen lost the race for the presidency in 2022, but she took 41% of the vote, the highest the far-right party has ever won. She badly wanted to run again in 2027, but it's too late now. Instead, she will have to sacrifice her own ambitions if she wants to see the party, founded by her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, take the highest office in the land. Waiting in the wings is party president Jordan Bardella, who is tipped to step into her shoes and become the candidate in 2 years' time. Winning power for the National Rally Party has been Marine Le Pen's lifelong work. It will not be easy for her now to step out of the limelight and into the shadows. Back to you.
Now, breaking just moments ago, two sources confirmed to CBS News that President Trump will make his first foreign trip of his second term to Saudi Arabia in May. Now, for context on this, President Trump's first foreign trip during his first term was also to Saudi Arabia at around the same time period. Viewers may remember that the president previewed this announcement earlier this month, saying a visit to the region would come over the next month and a half. Meantime, back in January, before the inauguration, we asked people if they expected the president's policies to make them better off financially. 42% said they expected to be doing better, but now only 23% say they're doing well under this current administration. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, breaks it all down for us.
We know this week brought some tough economic news, and Americans told us in recent polling they still rate the economy as bad. So what happens now as they evaluate what the Trump administration is doing on that front? Let me start with this measure of focus, because early on in an administration, it's often about what the public thinks a president is trying to do. Well, look at this. Nearly 2/3 say the administration not focused enough on trying to lower prices, but a majority does think that they're focused too much on imposing new tariffs. Now, why is that important? It's because of what they think tariffs might do. I tested this. What might they do in the short term and the long term? Because the administration's argument, of course, is partly that they might be positive over the long haul. Well, look, big numbers think that tariffs will raise prices in the short term, but there are also many who think that they would raise prices in the long term, too. So take a look, though, at what happens to Donald Trump's overall approval numbers. They've ticked down on handling the economy, ticked down on handling inflation. Let me turn to immigration, though, because that is net positive for the president. So let me show you why. Not just handling immigration, but also in particular, you get majority approval for his program to deport immigrants who are in the U.S. illegally. That remains positive. Another big topic, of course, in the news is changes to the federal workforce. That continues to split Americans, but one measure that I think worth watching is, do you think those cuts will have impact that matters, that you care about? Well, even a third of Republicans feel that it will, and big majorities of independents and Democrats think so. So that's certainly something to watch. And then, of course, what happens if we talk about checks and balances? Should federal judges be allowed to review a president's policies? Big majorities overall think so, slight majority of Republicans as well. But should, and some on the right talk about this, there be efforts to impeach federal judges who rule against Donald Trump's policies? We looked at that, and there is a majority of Republicans who would support those efforts as well. All part of the dynamic that's going on here in Washington and out in America with immigration, with the economy. That's a look at the latest CBS News poll.
Anthony, thank you so much. A Bitcoin billionaire trying to make history with a mission taking astronauts around the North and South Poles, while they are also bringing a part of a 19th century ship with them when they blast off. We'll have that coming up right here on CBS News 24/7. Israel has reportedly put forward a new proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza in exchange for about half of the remaining hostages still being held by Hamas in the enclave. Now, this comes as the Israeli military issued sweeping evacuation orders covering most of Gaza's southern city of Rafah, indicating another major ground operation. BBC News correspondent Dan Johnson has the very latest from Jerusalem.
Israel's military has warned Palestinians in the southern city of Rafah to evacuate the area, to move to safe zones as military activity increases there once again. This is somewhere where Israel launched a major military offensive last May, but its military is now returning to this city on the southern border of Gaza, close to Egypt. It says it needs to intensify its activity there to make sure that weapons and other items are not being smuggled across into Gaza, into the hands of Hamas. But it means, once again, thousands of Palestinians are on the move, being told to get to a safe zone, but they are unsure where to go to, where they can actually be safe. There are thousands of people displaced once again, and we know that hundreds of Palestinians, over 1,000 now, have been killed since the resumption of Israeli airstrikes nearly 2 weeks ago. And Rafah is a large city. It means that now a fifth of Gaza's territory is under evacuation orders from the Israeli military once again. It's all a complete change from the situation a month ago when the ceasefire was still in place and Palestinians had hoped they could get back to their homes and start rebuilding their lives. Well, the renewed hopes of a new ceasefire deal are still around. There are talks going on. Hamas has signalled that it would accept a new temporary 50-day ceasefire in return for releasing more Israeli hostages if Palestinian prisoners are released. The Israelis have put a counter-proposal, but there is as yet no agreement. Back to you.
Well, coming up in our Eye on America, baseball is back, and the pros you're watching on the field likely got their start when they were very young. But these days, youth sports have become more than just fun games, and it's taking a toll on our kids. I meet up with a former big leaguer who has made it his mission to change that. You're watching CBS News 24/7. It is our Eye on America series, CBS News hearing your stories from your neighborhoods. Now, baseball season is officially underway, and some of your teams are returning home today. I traveled to Seattle to bring you the story of a former major leaguer who was out to put the fun back in sports for kids and their parents. When Paul Dynas and his son Tanner head to the Diamond, they're no longer playing just to win. They're focused on something more important.
Told you.
Paul Dynas was, for a time, coaching Tanner's team, but now his coaching days are over.
I was a horrible parent for many years. I would follow him around the field.
And they're just like being super hard on me. And I made one error, and I got a big talking to about it.
Anna Dynas is Tanner's mom.
Every time Tanner struck out, he'd look at him, no matter what. And I'm like, he needs to stop because he's already in his head. And so now he struck out, and now he's worried about that, and he's worried about what he's thinking of him.
So you benched him?
Yeah.
The Dynas family had a problem and sought help from a real pro.
Who in here wants to play professional baseball?
Professional ball player Travis Snyder counsels parents to get off their kids' backs.
Snyder hammers one to center field.
After a 16-year playing career, Blue Jays, Pirates, Orioles. Now he's trying to change the culture of youth sports through his Seattle-based company, 3A Athletics. What do you want parents, coaches, and players to know?
We want them to have a community of resources and feel like they're not alone, because being a parent is incredibly difficult, and then you throw the pressure of sports, the time, the money, the energy. It just intensifies that emotional attachment that we have to our kids, who are the things we love the most.
And here's the reality. According to the NCAA, less than 7% of high school athletes play in college, and only 2% of them make it to the pros. Snyder, now a father of 3, brings a unique perspective to coaching kids and parents. As a boy, he was the best youth player in Washington State, but as an adult, he was diagnosed with complex PTSD after a lifetime of challenging moments.
You've been very open about this moment when you're 11 years old, you're standing there on the pitching mound, you're having a great game, but all of a sudden you have a meltdown. What happened?
At the time, I was the best player on the team, so that's a lot of pressure. And then when things don't go to plan, it was just too much for my emotional regulation to be able to process that while there's 6,000 people in the stands watching me fail.
The Dynas family says they benefited directly from the lessons Travis Snyder learned.
Tanner is all in on his strategy to make youth sports a learning experience, not an end game.
So, Paul, how important is winning now?
I don't care. I just want to see Tanner be happy. Winning does not matter to me. If he's happy, I'm happy, she's happy, and we go home.
Which, as a parent, may make him an even bigger winner. For Eye in America, I'm Elizabeth Cook in Seattle.
Play ball. All right, this is a look from Sutter Health Park in Sacramento, where the Athletics are starting a new era. First pitch for the team's home opener against the Cubs happening later on tonight. Now, this is the A's first year in Sacramento after leaving Oakland. The plan is to stay there until their permanent home in Las Vegas is ready. Let's take a live look now at Chicago, where stormy weather is moving across the country after slamming into states in the Midwest and the South. Let's bring in meteorologist Jessica Birch. I don't know if they're going to be playing baseball today. It might be a little soggy.
You know, what we're dealing with right now up north is just a whole bunch of snow, thunderstorm mix in some of those states. And then to add to that, widespread thunderstorm activity across the South. Oof. So we've been talking a lot about how that's been impacting air travel into areas like Atlanta Airport. There's been tornado warnings anywhere from Alabama over into Atlanta. So let's get a good look at where that storm is at and where it is going. There's two systems I'm concerned about this week. The one that's happening right now that's sweeping across the South, moving offshore of the East Coast into our Tuesday forecast. Tuesday evening into Wednesday morning, the second system right here, this one is going to bring in plenty of snow to the north, and it's also going to bring in a lot of thunderstorm activity anywhere from Florida all the way up into the Great Lakes. Timing the storm system out, it's really important to note a couple things. Right now, the biggest concern has to do with damaging winds, potential for tornado activity across all these states. Here's where it's at right now. It's pushed just to the east of Atlanta. They're still dealing with active storms right now, though, and that will continue to move over into the Carolinas within the next couple hours. Just south, closer to Alabama, Dothan, Alabama, just near Fort Rucker, Enterprise, these communities are dealing with tornado warnings right now in live time as the storm system moves its way to the east. Now into the overnight hours tonight, we can see the exact same setup, meaning tornado warnings are possible in states like the Carolinas all the way up into Washington, D.C. That moves its way up to New York City into the overnight hours tonight. And on the back end, remember that storm system that comes in on Wednesday? That's going to start strengthening as we head into Tuesday late night and early Wednesday morning hours from the Great Lakes with a mix of snow and sleet. We're also going to see plenty of thunderstorm activity to the south. So that enhanced risk right now for our severe weather outlook highlights most of the south stretching along that east coastline up into New York. We can see strong winds, wind gusts anywhere up to around 40 to 70 miles per hour just throughout these communities. And then on top of that, a chance for tornado activity too. We'll have more on that in a bit. For now, over to you, Liz.
Thank you, Jess. Well, if the weather is clear in Florida tonight, a Bitcoin billionaire will lead a first-of-its-kind mission. Astronauts will blast off to orbit the North and South Poles. And the 64 years that humans have been flying to space, this is a first. CBS News correspondent Mark Strassman sat down with the crew about their attempt to make history.
No humans have ever been in a polar orbit previously.
And that's intriguing to you?
Absolutely.
We're pitting our skills and our experience against a very unforgiving environment.
Now, the international crew of the privately funded Fram-2 mission has trained for nearly a year for this. It includes a German robotics researcher, a Norwegian cinematographer, and an Australian polar guide. The crew says when they first were approached for this incredible mission, some of them thought it was a joke.
How did you get the invitation?
I believe it was a WhatsApp message at the time.
And Jannica said I was a scammer.
Yeah, I did.
Who is this? Well, they will travel inside a SpaceX Dragon capsule. The plan is to fly about 270 miles up and orbit the Earth's poles 55 times over the 3.5-day mission. And they will conduct more than 20 experiments. The Fram-2 mission is named after the 19th century Norwegian ship Fram. It explored both the Earth's poles over 100 years ago. The crew will orbit with a piece of that original Fram ship. Can't wait to see the pictures from that. The launch window opens tonight at 9:46 Eastern Time from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. We have much more ahead right here on CBS News 24/7. We're on the ground in Houston, where in the next hour we're going to hear from the 2 NASA astronauts back on Earth after their 8-day mission stretched into 9 months. The SpaceX Crew 9 mission will answer questions and talk about the dozens of scientific experiments they conducted while aboard the space station. And this evening, President Trump is expected to sign another round of executive orders. We'll have the very latest on that. CBS News 24/7.